The Imperium housing district, associated with Ishgard, was added to Final Fantasy XIV at the start of the Endwalker expansion. It's a lovely area with some fun little hidden secrets, but it's also harboring something much darker just below the surface. Imperium has the most f***ed up weather in the entire game. At a glance, everything looks normal, sure, but all it takes is a little scratching to expose the horrors lurking beneath. By which I mean, if you try to make a weather forecasting tool to predict Imperium's weather, the same way that you would for literally every other overworld area, it will not work properly, either giving you the wrong weather or just no weather at all. Since Imperium has literally zero weather-dependent mechanics in it, no fishing, nothing, this is kind of a low priority issue, and most weather forecasting tools get around the problem by literally just not including Imperium at all. So, what is it about Imperium in particular that makes it so hard to forecast? To understand this, we need to look at the actual weather algorithm and understand how it works. Final Fantasy XIV generates its weather pseudo-randomly. Pseudo-random means that even though the results look random, they're actually 100% predictable if you know how they were calculated. The weather algorithm was data mined early into A Realm Reborn, and there's a few versions of it floating around in different programming languages, but they all do the exact same thing. We're not here to learn math or computer science, so I'm going to be kind of vague on a few points, but here's the quick rundown on what the weather algorithm is actually doing to generate the weather. Every 8 in-game hours, we take the current real-world universal Unix time, expressed in seconds, and convert that to an Eorzean date and time through a few steps. The next few steps are bitwise operations based on the binary version of this number. We bit shifted 11 spaces left, XOR it with the original number, then shift that 8 spaces right, XOR it with the original, and we're left with our big pseudo-random weather number. The last step of the algorithm is to take that big number modulo 100. If you're not familiar with modular arithmetic, it's sometimes called clock math, and the idea is it's mathematics performed on a smaller looping number line like a clock. The modulo operation itself basically just puts a number onto that looping number line. An easier way to think of it is it's just the remainder when you divide one number by another. So in base 10, any number modulo 100 is the same as just taking the last 2 digits. This gives us a number between 0 and 99, our final, pseudo-randomly generated weather number. This number then gets compared to the weather table, a large table containing every weather of every region in the game. The raw table is pretty obfuscated and there's cleaned up versions to be more easily used, but the way to read this is fairly straightforward. Each row starts with an ID number, which identifies which region that weather goes to. After this, the columns alternate between columns containing numbers that identify the weather type, which you can look up elsewhere if they aren't stated in the table, and columns containing numbers indicating the range for that weather type. For example, Limsa Lominsa Lower Decks corresponds to row 15 of this table. The weather ranges in order are clouds for 20, clear skies for 30, fair skies for 30, fog for 10, and rain for 10. Adding up to 100 total. And starting from 0, we can just stack them up from 0 to 99. So if the weather number we just calculated was 16, that means our weather on Limsa Lominsa Lower Decks right now is clouds. And we can repeat this for every single area in the entire game. One number controls all of the weather. This is why you see phenomena like fish stacks or buddies, where certain fish will always spawn together. If their spawn weather coincidentally uses the same ranges of numbers, then they'll always appear together because the weather everywhere is based on one number. Unfortunately, this otherwise very nice table has one bizarre outlier. For some inexplicable reason, Imperium, ID number 142, does not add up to 100. It only adds up to 90. It is the only entry on this entire table to not add up to a nice even 100. And this causes an immediate and obvious problem. What happens if your weather number is, say, 95? Clearly something has to happen because it's not like Imperium weather is just an empty void 10% of the time. But this is why weather forecasters struggle so much. On a fundamental level, Imperium is not playing nice with the existing algorithm. It's really obvious when some of these entries are broken, but it's also clear if you physically go to Imperium because the forecasted weather doesn't actually match up to the predicted current weather. And there's some more subtle weirdness too. The exact same weather number can give 2 totally different weather conditions. For a while, I saw people joking that Imperium weather must just be completely randomized. The fix for this is actually surprisingly simple. Behold! That's right, that's it. If you edit the algorithm to calculate the final weather number via mod 90, suddenly it works perfectly. This is why I bothered explaining how modulation works instead of just saying take the last 2 digits, by the way. The remainder, if you divide by 90 and when you divide by 100, will not be the same, so that distinction matters. And it matters a lot. Those cases where there were 2 different weathers off of the same number? Nope, they were actually different numbers. What happens if you get a number above 90? Well, now you can't. You only go from 0 to 89. I'd love to go through my entire thought process on how I figured this out and all the various hypothesis testing and brainstorming it took, but actually this was basically the first idea I came up with, so I get to feel very smart even though this section is a little bit underwhelming. I posted a thread on Twitter about this a couple of months ago as soon as I was confident, and it did some moderate numbers, so if you already knew about all of this, that was probably from me. So please don't snidely comment about how I'm ripping off a Twitter thread you already saw because I wrote the Twitter thread, thank you. Anyway, here is my question to the world. Clearly, this all means that the game programming itself can easily adapt to cases where the weather table doesn't add up to 100. So why don't they do this more often? It's not clear if Imperium's situation was even intentional or just a programmer error, but the fact that it works fine opens up a whole new slew of possibilities for more naturalistic weather. If the size of each weather table was different, they wouldn't all be forced to link up to each other like that, since the algorithm's final modulo step would generate a different weather number for each area from the same pseudo-random value. Like, for example, there's absolutely no reason that fog in the Raktika Greatwood should guarantee that there's astromagnetic storms in Ultima Thule. I recognize this is the most minor of minor things, but I personally think that it would be a neat thing to do, especially since we know that it's physically possible now. And of course, let's not forget where we started, fixing Imperium in weather forecasting tools. This is a little bit easier said than done depending on how you have things set up, because you can either implement a special case for Imperium specifically, where the last step of the calculation is mod 90 instead of mod 100, or you can set it up so that the last step is mod by whatever the size of the weather table entry is. To me, this option seems obviously better since it's future-proofed, but it's also more work and is proofing against a future that has no actual indication that it will ever arrive. But I think it would be cool if it did, so this is my personal preference, thank you. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Kafkaleo, where I have some other videos about fishing and chocobo racing. And I also stream on Twitch sometimes under the same name, mostly doing fishing stuff. And follow me on Blue Sky 2 maybe if you want. Have a nice day.